Okay, good evening, everyone. Calling this meeting of the Water Commission to order at 6:01 PM. All commissioners are present and accounted for. Please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, item number 4, citizen comment period. Are there any citizens signed up to speak? Nope, thank you. Item number 5, business items. We'll go to the first 5A, approval of the minutes for September 20th, Water Commission meeting. Are there any changes to the minutes starting on the left? Dr. Carmichael? Any changes on the right? Okay. No changes there. Can I get a motion to approve?
I have a motion to approve minutes for September 20th.
Thank you. We have a motion to approve. Do we have a second?
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. And that's unanimous. Approval of the minutes for September 20th. We are to item 5B, Utility Department Monthly Activity Report. Stephen, over to you.
Good evening. In September, we pumped 51 acre-feet from the Edwards with a year-to-date total of 282.47, with 254.96 acre-feet remaining. And for the Trinity, we pumped 53.47 acre-feet with a year-to-date of 594.3 acre-feet. We continue to monitor the Edwards Aquifer and Comal Springs for any stage changes that could affect the amount of water the city withdraws from the Edwards Aquifer. Currently, the Edwards Aquifer is in stage 4. They went into stage 4 on the 8th of October due to the Comal Springs flow dropping below 100 feet per second. All required distribution samples passed. We had a water loss of 2.6%. Monthly activities, completed 483 work orders, installed 1 new meter, replaced 1 meter, repaired 2 leaks. Total AMI notifications is 1,719, down 553 from August. Automatic drafts was 687, up 3 from August. AMI customer portal profiles was 717. It was up 16 from August. Abnormal usage was 154, down 25 from August. Continuous flow was 88, down 3 from August. Leak info codes was 555. Usage trends, 150, down 61 from August. Stage 2 restriction alerts was 762, down 501 from August. Like I said, we continue to watch the Edwards Aquifer and withdrawals. Right now, we estimate about, if we withdraw 1.9 acre-feet for a minimum, we'll have a reserve of 20 by December 31st. We pump a little bit extra sometimes, just in case we have a rainy day or two, so we're not lacking toward the end of the year. That's all I have to report for the water utilities report.
Thanks, Stephen. Appreciate that. Steve and I were talking a little bit about the water there, the rainfall that we're getting and everything, and I'm sure everybody's been tracking, but we've had about 8 inches of water for the year. Well, I don't know how much we got on Monday, and then normally it's around 28, so probably not going to get out of drought conditions anytime soon, and we're talking that's probably going to be drought restrictions as soon as the new year starts also. They're just going to roll over, unlike previous years. Okay, on that happy note, are there any questions for the utilities department on the right?
Yeah, Stephen, just one quick question. I forgot what the usage trend means between October and September and down 61. What are those units?
Oh, the AMI information. Hold on a second.
I think it's the abnormal usage alert.
Well, I was looking at, from the usage trend. I just wasn't sure what that meant on there. We're not using as much as a city?
No, it's Stephen, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's for if you For example, if you were to turn on it remembers your patterns. So if
Okay.
you were to water your grass on a day that's not normal, it would send an alert that there's a abnormal usage pattern.
I get it
In your
now.
water.
Yes, sir, thank you.
Did I get that right, Stephen?
Yes.
Okay.
It may not be a good question, but are we seeing a reduction in usage overall based on the stage 2 restrictions?
Yes, we're starting to see usage go below 1 million more often than not. Like Sunday, we had a pretty low usage. I think it was like, don't remember off the top of my head, I think it was like 600,000 for the day. But yeah, the people are using less water.
Don?
I had a question on the availability. You're saying you're using about two of your cubic feet a day, 1.9. You got about 75 days left. That's going to be about, say, 145 units. And right now we have 255 left. That's still a big gap. It's not more than the 20 that you're projecting. Am I missing something?
Yeah, we also, during that time, we lose for stage 4, 0.71 acre feet a day along
Okay.
with that.
Okay, I missed that part. I know there's some wasn't quite adding up on the numbers. Okay.
Did I miss any other questions? We good? Okay. Thank you, Stephen. All right, 5B2, items applicable to the Water Commission discussed at the council meeting. Vice Chair?
Yes, sir. So as far as items that are applicable to the Water Commission, one indirectly applicable is the Finance HR Department just mentioned that the auditors are going to be here from November 7th through the 10th. So that will affect the rate committee because we'll get an updated audited figures between now and when the council gets briefed, maybe. More directly, the council accepted the resignation of Commissioner Reynolds and approved the reappointment of Commissioners Stone and Haltman for an additional term. And there was also a change to ordinance 210 in the procedure to appoint commissioners. I'm not going to go all the details, but the part that really matters is that anyone who, we have some vacancies, so anyone who applies for our vacancies would be screened by the staff, and then there'll be an interview panel, and you'll be a member of that panel as the chair. And then the panel will basically do the interview, so it'll be a private interview instead of in public, and then the council will act on the recommendation. So we won't have to have the public inquisition that has happened in the past. And that's all I have, unless Ms. Kane thinks I missed something.
Mayor, anything you'd like to add? Okay. Any questions for the Vice Chair on the left? No? Anything? Okay, great. All right, moving right along there, we'll move to 5C, recommendations. The first thing that we have here is request for a water leak adjustment for 7933 Garden North for the billing period of March 23, 22 to April 23, 22. All right, for our recommendation, I just would like to remind all the commissioners that by law, the Water Commission does not have the authority to grant any financial credits. The Water Commission can only make recommendations to either the city administrator to take action for credits up to $500 or to the city council to take action for credits over $500. We'll follow the same process as previous meetings, which means we'll get a briefing from the utility department, and then we'll bring up questions. And I do have a phone, the applicant is not here tonight, but I do have a phone number if we have any questions for them. All right. So, Stephen, if you want to go ahead and get us started off on this one, please.
Okay, this is for 7933 Garden North. As you can see in their, on the spreadsheet, they had a like it had a bust that they had some sort of leak prior to the burst on 4/2/2019, And then up until 4/4, when it stopped, our water department helped this gentleman find the leak. And then you see the zeros where it stopped, but then again, it starts back up again for a while, up until 4:10, where you get more zeros. A couple key things on here is they got notified after the leak got repaired. And one of the things I wanted to point out is the few and far between zeros that are afterwards. It might look like there's a leak, but then you get a zero here and there, which would indicate no leak, so I wanted to point that out also. But one of the major things was that on the bill invoice, it said he had a pressure of 110 PSI, and that it didn't qualify for his insurance company to, we wouldn't be insured for them to fix, so we had to probably pay straight out of pocket. And our ordinance also says, refers to the International Plumbing Code of 2009, where if you have above 80 PSI, you need a pressure reducing valve put in. He has a pressure reducing valve, but it probably just over time went bad, because usually either when you get a bad pressure reducing valve, it either shuts your water almost completely off or your pressure goes sky high. But yeah, that was a couple things I wanted to point out, but otherwise, something got repaired. Down the line, there was water stoppage where it was no flow, so it's really a hard one to really decide on what to do on it, for me anyways, because it's real thin. But I brought it to your attention because I wanted to get y'all's opinion on it also.
Thanks, Stephen. I can't remember if you mentioned it, but it's in the packet. It was pretty far away from the house also, right?
Yes, there's I believe I attached a map on there, several hundred feet away from the house, from the driveway, so it was hard to detect. Plus, it was adjacent to a drainage culvert that would not really readily be seen by anybody driving by.
And I just had one more question before I hand it off to other folks. Do you know if they, I assume they replaced the pressure relieving, okay, the PRV. Great. All right, that's it for me. Any questions for Mr. Steinmetz over on the right first?
So, and just in the packet, the customer on the form they filled out said they requested adjustment back to their average consumption. And then in here where you have the normal Tier 2 compensation, I don't know if we've had any further contact with the customer, if they were insistent on that, or if they've indicated to you that the standard adjustment might be sufficient to meet their request.
No, I have no correspondence with talking to him about that. It's about the 20, the Tier 2, because that's happened back when the Tier 2 was the 20. As you can see, he used more than, what did I have, 73,000? $73,000, so I had to basically balance that between the scales to get what the adjustment would have been.
And then just to clarify on these zeros where you see a whole series of numbers and you get 1 0 for an hour, somewhere in my memory I recall on these CAMSRT meters with the AMI that if for any reason interruption in signal, if any reason happens where it doesn't get a good reading on an hour, it would show a 0 and then it catches up the next hour. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Sometimes when you're looking at these leak adjustments, you'll see, it'll show a 12-hour period on there, and then sometimes you'll see just 8 hours, and then you'll see a high number where it caught up off to the side.
Okay, so we shouldn't put too much of weight on having a 1 or 2 zeros that show up. Okay. That's all I have.
The only thing I have is, I'm glad you pointed out that they did have a pressure reducing valve on there, that it just failed. And how are they really realistically? No, I don't think they're out there checking their water pressure every day, and maybe there's justification to have people do that, but that's not something I would typically do. So I'm glad you pointed that out. And I have to admit, I'm a little disappointed in I love our new alarm system, but it's discouraging that it came so late in, and I noticed, like, when I check mine, my usage, I'm always 5 or 6 hours behind, so I wouldn't get an alarm on a lot of my stuff either, I think, if I get, have a burst like that. So anyway, thank you very much.
Dr. Carmichael?
Yeah, I'm a little curious, and I have to look at this more closely, but because the request came in sometime after the leak, this has been an ongoing leak, so why did when did they file? The leak was primarily in April, you said? And we got the request just recently. 5/27?
If you, what page is that in the packet? The request form, you can see the received stamp of May 2nd on there.
Okay.
Commissioner Stone, any questions?
Is there any procedure that maybe send out a little notice to people, let them know, you might want to check your, go down Lowe's and buy a $5 pressure meter just to check it, because they had their meter, pressure reducer, and they thought it was working, it didn't. It's not like the pressure, the backflow valve inspection you have to do every year for the sprinkler systems. But there's something that the city can do, just send out, just a reminder. You might want to check them, because this might have avoided this problem if someone would have gone out there and just checked, make sure that they have adequate pressure.
So there's no requirement in ordinance 54 to do any of that.
Well, I'm not saying requirements. I just maybe as a customer service for the city, just maybe send out a little reminder. You just think about it.
I think I think that's not a bad idea, that we can maybe throw something in the grapevine or something like that.
Because if they go bad, okay, but again, you'll never know,
Sure.
unless your pressure goes off the charts, or you have a massive leak and then find out your insurance won't cover it now.
I'll follow up with city staff about that.
I think we could definitely do like public education, something like that along those lines. I'm hesitant about sending out like a mass notification to everyone, as if it's just information that's a reminder, because I don't want people to get annoyed of those notifications and then turn them off and not get the important ones. But we can definitely do some public education about
Well,
that.
just something, because these guys just took a hit, and they never knew anything was wrong. And the insurance, they're going to use anything they can to get out of it.
Right.
Okay, any questions for Stephen on what he briefed for the leak? Dr. Carmichael, come back to you. Any questions? Okay.
I have another question now that I'm looking at more detail. So on the number that we have for the leak, for what you're crediting as being water loss, I'm wondering if you might talk through a little bit, or the past history, anyway, looking at the historical stuff, is pretty low usage. So obviously the burst is significant. But after the leak is repaired, I don't see very many zeros. I mean, there's a handful of them in there, but not many. It looks like there's 3 weeks at least in the record of 1s and 2s and 3s every hour. So I'm not 100% sure it's fixed. So I'm wondering if we've noticed anything since.
Haven't looked anything up to this date. That's why I was pointing it out. It's pretty thin. I mean, that you'd really have to be stretching the graph for just a couple of zeros in there. I guess what I'd like to get at is we probably should have some sort of parameters after a leak got fixed of how often or how many occurrences would it show for a leak be present or not. I mean, I've ran into people that say that they constantly use water because they're always up throughout the day and night. So that's one thing to consider, but just kind of need some parameters to go by that would be more concrete than just a few incidents.
Vice Chair, can I ask a clarification there? Do you think that, is your concern that there is still a leak? Or, I mean, it's pretty obvious that there was a very large leak and that large leak was repaired. What's your concern about let's call it continuous flow after the repair?
So again, just looking at the historical period before, there's an average of pretty low usage, like 10,000 per month. I was just wondering what's happened since May that might indicate to the customer, like AMI is only going to give you an alert if it's outside the norm and it has to reset for a period of time. So it's possible if there's just a slow continuous leak, you may not get a warning for it. And so my concern is just not coming back another month with a further adjustment for what could be the same event. I don't have any question that a leak occurred and that there's an entitlement here. But I'm not sure how we figure out the total gallons that were a leak if we don't have a firm indication that, a reason to believe it's stopped. So I don't know if this is something we need to ask the customer. Hey, are you one of these people who has home medical devices or whatever where you're using water 24 hours a day? But that wouldn't be supported by a historical basis and only 10,000 gallons a month. So I'm concerned from the city and the customer point of view, just whether or not we actually fix the problem. They may still have some small problem that they're not aware of.
And the AMI could be thinking that this is their history. It might be just reading what they think is their average, maybe.
I mean, the difference in, the leak was over 1,000 gallons per hour, so that was repaired.
No, I'm sure of that, and I
Okay.
don't think that changes anything. I just want to, from city point of view, whether or not we're finishing the case.
Yeah, I agree. That's a pretty long water line from the meter to the house. That's quite a distance to try to cover.
I think I put in yeah, one's 389 feet, and then the other one's like 165 feet from the driveway.
So we kind of have a couple of, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, all the data we have stops at the end of April in the packet. So it's hard, I have no knowledge of what happened after that. But before that, the highest month of consumption is 12,000, and that was back in July of 2020. So if we have, no kidding, 1,000 to 2,000 gallons every hour going on, it's going to be more than 10 for the month. So I'm just wondering if we have any post data that might help know if this customer still has another issue, a small leak somewhere. We probably don't have access to that here right now, though, but the only thing we could do is ask the customer if you guys think it's worth the time. I don't think it affects the burst. That's pretty obvious. It's just may not have fixed all of the problems, and then it could deteriorate again in the near future.
Would you, from here on out, would you like to see a month before and a month after on the leak adjustments?
Well, not necessarily on the AMI data, but on the consumption history where you look. especially if it's been a couple months, at least a month after, so we can see if it's consistent. But that's also, I mean, it's really a question for, it doesn't affect this particular instance, it's just whether or not there's a future problem hiding there that hasn't been found, so it's kind of a mutual city and customer interest here.
I think certainly we can follow up with the customer and perhaps see if there's any kind of continuous, continuous stuff going on there. All the usual suspects that you talked to them about, right?
I had another
No further.
question there.
Go ahead.
I'm looking in the future, you got 429, you got some high usage. Is that going to be a leak adjustment come next month? Or 2 months from now? On the first page? From 429 to 430?
No, it's not, because they're outside the window.
I know, I'm saying, but, what happened there? Yeah, we're talking about, was the leak fixed? I was wondering, because that's a big chunk of water there.
Actually, doesn't
Okay,
it-
hold on a second, folks. Does anybody have any questions for the applicant? Did we cover that already? Are there any questions? Do we need to call them tonight to make a decision? Okay,
No.
I don't see anyone wanting to do that. All right, so I'm going to summarize here real quick. So we have the rather large leak that happened there. We see the spike on the second, running through the fourth with the shut off, and then the repair of that rather large leak, and that's what our current assumption of 73,000 gallons leaked was based upon there in your packet. And I don't think we have any more questions for Mr. Steinmetz. And this is over $500, so if we do have a recommendation, that'll have to go to council for approval. I see someone,
Yeah, I just have
Go
a
ahead.
question. So I noticed in the summary, it says 63,000 gallon leak. Am I looking at that right? Or was there, should that be 73,000 in the summary on this page right here of, it's 31 to 38 on, it's after that last picture. Should the number be 73,000 on the leak?
Well, I had to start from the tier 2, which is 20,000 gallons.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
total was 83 minus the 20, we get to 63. If there's any further discussion, comments, or anything, we can go ahead and get those out on the right. Anything? On the left? Does anyone have a recommendation?
I do, and it's in two parts, if you want it that way. Or I can do it as two separate ones. How would you prefer?
I don't know, I haven't heard them yet, but let's go for it.
All right, I'll do them one at a time. So my first recommendation, I guess it would be a motion. My first motion is that the commission recommend to the water manager and utility clerk that they follow up with the customer at 7933 Garden North and verify there's not a continuous low flow issue.
I don't think that's a recommendation that needs voted on or anything like that. Stephen, I think you're already going to do that. Thumbs up?
Yes.
Could be consensus then.
Yes.
All right, then I move that Water Commission recommend to City Council the approval of a leak adjustment in the amount of $589.66 to the customer at 7933 Garden North.
Okay, we have a recommendation to forward to City Council to approve the leak adjustment of 589.66 for 7933 Garden North. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a recommendation and a second. Any additional discussion on the left? Dr. Carmichael? On the right? All right. All in favor of the recommendation, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Unanimous approval of the recommendation for the adjustment. All right. That ends item C1. We are item C2, water rate structure. Vice Chair, you're up.
All right, while they're pulling up the presentation, little, alibis up front, I guess. What you'll see is work in progress, intended just to update the commission on where we're at right now. So it's not ready for city council yet. Thank you. First note, on October 11th, Commissioner Stone and I met with city staff and Councilmember Valdez as the representative of the Water Commission to review data from the previous year. So the consumption data and the financials, and just kind of see where we're at and get current recommendations, and talked over it a little bit. And that's the last meeting we've been able to have. From that, I've taken what was available to me and tried to put it in a format that's similar to what you saw last year. But again, still working. There's been some changes in the formatting of the way the information has been presented, which I'll talk about as I go through here. But bottom line is we're in a good shape as far as revenue is concerned. So it's not likely that any adjustment will be required, but I'm still working through the process. So with that said, we'll start and see where we get, if I can make this work. All right, that's what a full presentation would be. We're only going to get through the first couple. And just as a quick reminder for background, this started way back in 2018 with Waterworks doing their initial analysis. Then it was handed over to the commission, and in November 2019, a 14% water rate increase was approved. The following year, council approved to change the rate structure. It was a 10% increase on the base rate for inside the city, and then an additional 2% for tiers 3 and above, with a 3% on tiers 1 and 2. So that established the increasing curve, if you will, on the rate structure, that as folks use more water, the actual percentage increase went up. Also that year, the AMI project was self-funded from reserves. So that caused some impact in the following year. And then last year, council approved new rates where the initial 5,000 gallons that was included with the base rate was eliminated. The first tier started at 1,000 gallons and it went up every 10,000. And there was also a $2.50 increase to the base rate for the 3/4 inch meters. The actual tier rates did not change. So we've had basically 3 consecutive rate increases trying to get to where the water company is self-funded with no issues. As far as the objective, I'm not going to spend a lot of time. You guys saw this last year. That's just from American Water Works Association of some recommended objectives to think about. What the council approved last year and what Commissioner Stone and I and the staff think we should do is just continue with that same objective. So you see them up on the slides there, with priority given to full cost recovery to build up the reserves to 12 months and revenue stability, so that we're not having to change it as much as we've been having to change it. So now we'll look at the current results briefly. So this is the rate structure as it exists right now. Again, the base rates went up, and the tiers start at 1,000 gallons. So basically no water is included with the base charge. And this allows you to compare what happened with the rates between 2021 and 2022. So the delta column is the change. It looks a little bit odd because by moving the tiers down by 5,000, what happens is the first 5,000 of the tier saw a rate increase, but the second 5,000 was already in the higher tier. So it appears that there was an increase every 10,000 pounds, or gallons, sorry. All right, the consumption numbers, it's a little bit apples and oranges, so I'll try to be as clear as I can. We added in the last year's consumption figures, that's the FY 2022 column. The utility data went through a spreadsheet process to separate each bill into the appropriate tiers. So tier 0 shows up there just because in 19 and 20, that would represent that first 5,000 that was included. 2021 was recomputed to make it comparable with 2022, so it does not show a tier 0. The way you can infer on that is that 0 and 1 could basically be added together on the prior ones to be comparable to that first 10,000 gallons. You can see the trend has continued to increase in consumption. And this last year was a abnormally dry and hot year, so no surprise, consumption went up significantly. 2021 was actually a fairly cool, damp year, and so while consumption went up slightly, it's mostly attributable to just new meters. And then overall trends, you can see that the mean total has been increasing, but most importantly, I want to point out the variability there, that over that 5-year sample, it's gone plus or minus 12% roughly based on is it a hot year or a dry year. So we need to keep that in mind when we look at rates, that we're comparing consumption from a really dry year this last year. There's nothing to say we might not have a wet one next year. So keep that in mind. All right, same process for outside the city limits. They're just fewer accounts and smaller numbers. As a result, the variability is even greater. Because their rate structure is higher, it's a little bit more elastic in terms of demand. When it's wet, they really cut back their use. This is only here for contrast. I didn't get a chance to rerun this for this year, but just as a reminder that the average usage, which is marked in red, in most cases for inside the city residential, our median user, if you will, is in tier 1. So half of our users are in the 0-1 tier range. Outside the city, it's even more dramatic. They're pretty close to tier 0. All right, now this is the one that makes my brain hurt. And this is where we had changes in the way the data is reported between the 2 years. So the column that says model forecast is taken straight from the numbers that you saw last year from the prediction in our model. So those numbers are what we had. What is a little bit confusing about it, if you will, that net revenue number that you saw forecast with that model was $6,425, but that's because the model includes the required reserve contribution. So I've adjusted the net revenue figure to reflect revenue prior to setting aside reserves. So if we didn't have that built in the model would have predicted $122,941 in excess of expenses from our revenues. The actual performance is a little harder to measure. So last year, if you recall, we had a 2021 amended budget figure. That was not provided this year. We have the 2022 and the 2023, but not an amended number in between. So what we used was the revenue and expense report, and there's a big caution there that those numbers are unaudited and the timeframes don't always overlap. So I had to make some guesses as to which accounting category some of the numbers fit in. With that said, the FY 2022 is strictly a budgeted number at the beginning of last fiscal year, but you can see the numbers are relatively close for the prediction. The model used those debt numbers and the expense numbers, so that's why the model numbers and budget are the same. And the revenue was predicted to be a little more than what the budget said, but the budget used conservative assumptions. So if you look at the revenue and expense column, that's a little more fair for what actually happened, but again, unaudited. And what we see there is the total revenue was up 12% over what was forecast in last year's model. Expenses were up slightly. And so as a result, the net revenue went up more than the model predicted. But what you see, it's about 3 times more net revenue, but it's only 12% more sales. And the consumption increase was even less than that. It was about 10%, 3 million gallons per month over about 30 million total. So what that is telling us is that while the model is fairly good, it is highly sensitive to what those weather conditions do. Small changes can have a big impact. So with that said then, the gain or loss figure to the fund balance, that's purely an estimate because the accounting data right now doesn't break it out that way. But if I use the same procedure last year, we've got about 1.5 million in the reserve fund. So that took us up to about 9 months of reserves. Again, this is unaudited information. The prediction from last year's model, it was built to increase reserves to about 7 months, 7.2. So again, since we had the dry year, we brought in a little bit more than is expected. The end of year utility report column is not there. We can't seem to find that. I don't know if that format exists in the new billing structure. So those numbers come from taking the consumption numbers and applying the rate structure, basically. So the 610,000 that you see for revenue from base rates, that's going to be pretty close to the actual number because the number of meter connections are known. The revenue from volume sales is a little less. It's a little bit more of an estimate, but again, it'll be pretty close based upon the consumption and the rate structure. Just remember on those numbers that the first quarter is under the old rate structure, so they should be normally a little less. And the fact that they show up a little more just means we did much better than expected. All right, I'm going to pause there because I know that's a lot to make your head hurt. So if you have questions, I'll try to answer them. And maybe Nancy might have some more insight on that as well.
Yeah, I just want to say this is fantastic. I am blown away by these. This answered a ton of questions that I had going on in my mind, so I really appreciate the screen right here. All I say is fantastic job for y'all putting this together. This is awesome in my view, so thank you.
Is there anywhere, I don't know if there's any way to include the income from the sewage system, which is not near operational yet? Then the other question / concern I have is on the adjustments made by council for the new development that cannot bring us water rights to the Edwards. I mean, we know that's not going to happen, but the money that comes from that, it needs to stay in the water department. I don't know where it goes or how we determine where it goes. I'm sure Stephen has a lot to say about that, but as far as what projects go. So, questions for now.
So some of that I can answer a little bit, and then I'm sure Nancy could give some more. But I asked those questions in our meeting, and basically the second part first with payments in lieu of providing water rights. That will go to the water department, but it will go in a restricted reserve. There's only certain categories that it can be used for, essentially for capital improvements and or acquiring additional water. So I don't have the full list, but what you'll see coming in next year would be, there will be another line in there, but it'll be a restricted reserve. It won't be open for just general use. Anything to add on that, Nancy? The other question on the sewage rates, again, we don't put that in there. It's a forecast based on what's approved, and as of right now, the sewage part is under under the council side to recover that. That hasn't been turned over to the Water Commission yet. But once that revenue starts showing up, it will become a part of the Water Department, both the revenue and the expenses, but it's not there yet.
So the payments in lieu of are in a restricted reserve, which will be protected in the future, which,
Protected in the sense that it can only be used for certain things. It can't just be used for all M&O expenses. But the details on that I don't have, so I'll refer that to Nancy.
Commissioner Harshberger is correct. It would be in a restricted fund. There would only be certain things that that money could be used for. The purpose of the funds was to help us ensure that we had adequate water supply for our residents as well as the development. In the proposal to council, it was proposed that the monies be used to improving water infrastructure, for instance, perhaps adding additional water storage. Another part of it was to have money available to either purchase or lease water rights if we come across them or find a need for leasing. The third item was helping us acquire additional water resources, whether it be another well or another source of water somewhere. But the main purpose is ensuring that the city does have an adequate supply of water.
If there's nothing else, I'll continue with the rest of it. We're almost, almost there.
Commissioner Stone, do you have any? Okay.
All right, so moving on. Normally, at this point, we'd go and we'd tell you all the details about the model data and what was updated on it. So what we will have to do is try to bring up the actual spreadsheet, and I'll talk through the changes, but I haven't got them put into a nice presentation format yet where we can do that. So can you bring up the, Jennifer? And we'll just start on the first tab in step one. That looks actually pretty good. So the first part of the process is to take those consumption figures and input them in. So can you scroll up just a little bit? Oh, you're gonna make me dry, huh? Hard to see from here. All right. So these numbers over here are the consumption figures that you saw on the slide where we were comparing the different fiscal year. So that gets put into the model. And so the model essentially uses last year's consumption data to forecast what will happen in the future years. And that's what this first page is, just putting it all in with the different rate structures. The next step is there are some assumptions built into the model. These, for the most part, did not change as far as the number of accounts you start with and what the assumed growth rate is. So it's assuming like a 0.5% growth rate residential inside because the city's pretty close to built out on that regard. It does have down under the 1.5 and 2 inch meter sizes. It does have a 10% increase, but with the small numbers, that's basically assuming we get 1 meter in each category over the year. So that's not an unreasonable assumption. And then it has a figure for the change in consumption based on trends. What that really is, okay, you got your AMI meter, people are learning how to use it, you get more efficient appliances and things like that. It basically assumes that each year there would be a 1% reduction in consumption if nothing else happened. Same number of people, it just assumes that we would conserve better. So that's built into the model as well. And it also has an elasticity figure for prices. So if prices go up, it says consumption would go down a small amount. So that's built in there as well. And that's no change from the previous year. And then there's the fees, the meter fees, that's basically from the budget. All right, the debt service, I'm taking this as good. I don't have the source data for this, but basically my understanding is staff went in and looked at the debt service and just input the numbers, and Councilman Valdez was kind enough to put them in the model for me. So those are the numbers, but keep in mind that does not reflect any new projects. That's just what's been approved. When you do these rate structure studies, you're supposed to forecast the next 5 years out for new projects, but the water master plan is still in development. So right now it's not there. Just keep that in mind that with the expansion of the intersection on 2252 and 3009 and possible new commercial infrastructure, there's a high likelihood that there'll be additional projects in the future. So we need to watch that in terms of our reserves. And then you take expenses. So the expenses, the way the model works, the one change is the inflation number was increased from 3.5% to 5%. But again, we have to kind of trick the model. The model assumes you put in last year's budget figure and then it applies inflation. What we have is the approved city budget for next year. So you basically take that number and decrement it by 5% and then enter those so that the model will increase it, so that next year's numbers will actually be the budget numbers. And then after that, it assumes a 5% growth across the board in all those categories. So it's important to know what the assumptions are in there, but the only one that changed was the 5% instead of 3.5%. And that's pretty much the assumptions that go into the model. What this is the base case. So this is if we change nothing, what would it look like? And the basic facts here are that with the current rate structure, it's predicting a significant increase to add to reserves. In fact, so it shows revenue neutral because it doesn't have any additional reserves set aside. It's still adding about $114,000 a year to the reserves in order to build up to our 12 months that we talked about. But the net figure, I went to the wrong page, so bear with me one second. Where did it go? Oh well, I'll go to the back door. The net figure for fiscal year 2023 would be a total revenue of $2.4 million. Total expenses of 1.94 for a net revenue of 495,000 is what the model would predict. Now, if you recall, we needed to add about 200,000 total just to catch up. So this is saying that you have $250,000 to $300,000 more than expected. But the increase in our revenue, remember from last year to the year prior, was $122,000 just from having a wet year, or a dry year. So my point here is, it looks like you have about $200,000 extra, but all you need is a wet year to have that $200,000 to go away. So given that we're under the 12 months of reserves that we would like to have, without completing further study, I would simply say that we're better off keeping the rates stable, and maybe we get the reserves built up a year earlier than expected. But given what's going on, I think that would be the most prudent course of action. Having said that, there's still an opportunity to look at the various rate structures and look at those secondary cost objectives and see if there's minor adjustments that need to be made. But right now, that's where we're at. So it's overall a good news story. We just got to be careful with the weather conditions and recognize that last year was abnormal. And that's all I have for today. I'll be happy to show anything else that's on here if you have questions.
Starting on the left, any questions?
The only question I have is, and this might go to Ms. Kane, of if we ever, this is beautiful, I'm blown away by this. If we ever do need to change the rate structure, how fast can that be done, like in an emergency type situation? Is this able to change like if it needed to be updated to increase revenue or anything like that at any point? Or is it a yearly thing? Am I making sense?
You are. Over the past, 4 years, we have done this as an annual effort. A lot of our numbers are based on that prior year's numbers. In an emergency situation, I think it would have to be a fairly significant emergency in order for the council to consider, or even the commission to recommend any kind of an increase.
Definitely understood, but it is something that's.
But if we build our reserves back up, should we have an emergency, we should have ample funds to help us through that situation. And then in the next year, or in the next phase of going through our annual review of our water rates, then that would be, we can still follow that process. I hope that made sense.
Oh, it did. Thank you so much. It's very unlikely that would happen from what I'm hearing. So I got your point. So thank you very much. I just was.
You're welcome.
Can I get a do-over? I have a couple of questions on some of the assumptions, actually, and maybe it's a lead-in to something Commissioner Harburger and John and I are working on. One is the number of counts staying pretty much stable. And I remember some development plans that I viewed, which would include either apartments, townhouses, or condominiums as part of that development, which would increase, I think, our accounts quite a bit. So I don't know if that's taken into account again on your model. The other is on the consumption or the restriction or limits to limiting the consumption of water. And that goes to one thing that I'd like to work on, that would be, but we need to get some guidance from the council, because when the council grants money in lieu of, are there any restrictions on the development for the use of low-flow facilities? I spent a week in mostly Pennsylvania where they used, I saw a significant number of waterless facilities in different malls and places, which is interesting, this being used. But would we need, and we would need to go through and amend or change, I think, the places where we could fit into existing ordinances requirements for existing commercial facilities, at least, to start replacing some of their high flow utilities, sinks, other items with low flow. Because I know we have some. I go to market days, they do not have low flow facilities in there by today's standards. But if we could do that for some existing commercial or non-residential facilities, but also add that as a requirement for those who want money or to give us cash in lieu of, to build that into the new development.
I think that's a good point. I just don't think that will be in the, I don't know how we'd account for that in the water rate structure that we're discussing right now, but I do hope that we keep bringing that forward for possible ordinance changes as we move forward.
Yeah, I agree, but I think if, before we even start ordinance changes or going that direction, and maybe I'm wrong, but we would need guidance from the council to tell us if they think it's a good idea to go down that road, or just leave everything as is. So,
Yep. I'll take a note, and we'll come back to that exact topic there. Is there anything else? So what I think I heard there, as far as do you want to recommend to the council no change, or just don't forward a recommendation this month? I can cover it in the monthly report at the next council meeting saying, hey, we're gathering more data, but we don't think we're going to have anything for you. Full recommendation pending? Is that what you're suggesting here? Or?
So yes, I guess my point of view is that after 4 years of coming to public meetings and telling our customers how bad it was and how much we have to increase the rates, I feel like we owe a presentation that says, okay, we don't have to increase the rates, and go through that formally. And if that is the case, I'm not quite there yet where I can show you a presentation before it goes to the council. Having said that, since I think there will be no need for a change, I don't think there's a time pressure to try to get it to the council right now. I think we could afford to wait, and I can come back to you next month with a more finished product after Commissioner Stone gets to look at it. So that's my recommendation, but I'm also telling you that I'm not uncomfortable with going forward with a recommendation that we don't need any change. I just think it'd be better to have a full presentation.
I actually like that idea. Are y'all worried about the timing at all? Ms. Kane, you're good?
Typically, the council has received the recommendation concerning increases during the month of December, but no later than January council meeting, because those changes were implemented in that February-March billing period.
So, ma'am, you're okay with it as long as if we do need to make a change, it's no later than December?
I would be comfortable with that, but Mayor, your comments?
Yeah, the timing actually works out to get Commissioner Harshbarger's math all done and presented at November's meeting at for the Water Commission, and then you could turn around in 2 weeks later and brief us in the December council meeting. That timing actually works out smashingly, so, in my opinion. Yeah, and Jesse's giving me a head nod there too, so good stuff.
Well, if you're getting a head nod from Jesse, I think that pretty much closes the deal right there, so. Okay, so we'll hold it there, and then make sure that we have the presentation all tidied on November for taking to council in December.
We'll do, and I will give Commissioner Stone a chance to look at it and a chance to get some additional data from staff to make it a little more complete.
Got it. And on the left, any concerns about that course of action? On the right, we all good?
Chairman Mueller, can I
Yes, sir.
add one more thing?
Yes, sir.
I completely agree with Commissioner Harshbarger there that we owe it to our customers/residents a formal presentation that he could give at December's meeting, and what the work you've done is Herculean. So every time you do something, it turns to gold. So combined with everybody else that's working on it, but thanks so much.
All right, and I'll echo that. Thanks also. Appreciate it, Kevin. Thank you. Okay, we should be to 5C number 3. All right, so we have a request for a variance to ordinance number 61, drought demand reduction measures for 22168 via Pasado Drive for an exception to watering restrictions for watering of newly installed sod.
Chairman Miller?
Go ahead.
There is no need for the commission to discuss this item. After the agenda was posted, I spoke further with the resident, and she was able to accommodate the watering of the new sod by hand as well as on her one watering day. So there was no need to, at that point, but we already had it on the agenda. So there's nothing to consider on that variance request tonight.
Well, I like the answer to that one. Okay. We'll move on to item number 4 then, Water Commission activities and projects. As we go through here, I want to go ahead and bring up a couple of things. First of all, on the ordinances, we mentioned the discussion about possibly how we can work to build in some of those requirements for the no water use for new building that you were talking about there. So to bring that up, I am happy to bring that, to get that to council, but I think there are a couple of steps we need to do. First, we need to talk about the benefits, certainly to the Water Commission there, and get that through our group. Then I think we are actually going to have to, Ms. King, correct me if I'm wrong here, we're going to have to lateral that to the P&Z because that's actually going to be a building, no? Go ahead.
I don't think you will not need to go to planning and zoning because that would not be anything that would be put into a zoning ordinance. I believe it can remain within the water company ordinance. Perhaps it could be some type of consideration that could be placed in the ordinance that will be controlling the in lieu of fee. I would need to check further on that, but.
Got it. Okay. Well, that's good news. But I think before we take this to council, certainly we need to have what changes we want to make to what ordinance and what are the benefits to the city and to our customers. If we can get all that lined up, then we can go ahead and take that to council. Sound good, sir?
Commissioner Haldeman, Commissioner Haldeman's working on this with me. We've started preliminary discussions, so.
And I do have a little bit of confusion. Are we talking about retroactive type stuff no, okay, good. That confused me a little bit. We're just talking about anything. And so they'll have to follow the codes that are in place now for low consumption, the things that are in the ordinance or in the IPC and that right now for low flow things. So are we going stricter than the low flows since it all futures? I was starting to think maybe we were trying to look at making them replace older fixtures that did have more.
No, we're not looking.
I'd like to do that, but.
Okay, but
We're not going to do that.
Do we have, I think all that's kind of code now anyway. I may be wrong.
I'm not sure. I don't think, it's not, I don't believe it's code. I think low-flow facilities are code, but it would be things like your landscape, xeriscaping.
Oh, okay.
Along with ensuring that all the water use in the building is low flow, maybe tankless water heaters, maybe being a little more enforceful on the tankless water heater or the flow system that allows the hot water to come faster so you don't.
And I
have so
definitely know
much
that is
wastage.
part code if you're if you're not within 50 feet of a fixture that you do have to have a recirculating loop in.
I don't know if that's in our ordinances, but yes, that type of thing.
And there'll be fun
Okay, let's
stuff we
get
can check
get a rope around this for a second. Okay, what we're talking about is we're talking about new construction, looking at incentives for conservation tied to in lieu of water rights. That's what I thought we were doing? That's where we're going to start, yes. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. And if you need any help from the ordinance folks, just give us a call. All right, for education, on the education subcommittee, that is an item that we had earlier. Where did I write it down? Man, there was something that we were talking about when we were talking about the water loss adjustment that we wanted to put in the public education. Did we get that captured? And pressure reducing valve, thank you. And we've got that all captured, and city staff has that for action. Yes, okay, great. Anything else for education? Okay. I think we've heard enough about water rates. You don't get to talk anymore, I'm sorry. I think that's it we're going to discuss on that. Is there anything I'm missing on Water Commission activities and projects? From anybody on the left? On the right? Okay, great. All right, I think that brings us to item number 5, ordinance 210, and this is to receive a recommendation and consideration of the appointment of the Water Commission Chair and Vice Chair for a one-year term effective October 2022. So first, this is the point in the meeting where I asked all people to take a step forward and we see what happens on this. Is there any volunteers that would like to be chair or vice chair for the upcoming year? Stunned silence, I'm shocked. I already talked to the vice chair there, and for myself, we're both absolutely willing to serve another term, but we would encourage anyone else that would like to be the chair or vice chair, by all means, speak up. We're willing to share the burden if anybody else is interested. If not, we will definitely need a motion there and a vote on this stuff inside of our commission, and then we'll inform council. So I need either volunteer or I need a motion.
I motion to have the current chair and vice chair continue on next year.
All right, so we have a motion for the current chair and vice chair to continue serving for another one-year term effective October of 22. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the left?
I actually do have one question. Since we lumped them all together, so you and I don't vote? Or can we can I give a half vote and not vote for myself?
Yes.
You can still vote on it.
Okay, thank you.
Sir, all right, so we have a motion and a second, no further discussion, other than I'll add in, thanks for your confidence if you guys do approve this. So all in favor, aye? Aye. Any opposed? And unanimous. So there we go for another one-year term for us. Thank you, everyone. All right, moving on to future agenda items. Do we have any commissioner inputs on future agenda items on the right?
Obviously, we'll keep the rate structure.
Yes, please keep the rate structure on there, and we will come back to that as we talked about.
This, I believe it was brought up before, is something I'm really interested in. We always talk about the pressure reducing valves at the houses. And we've talked, and I understand that, I think the fire department is the driving force on what they need at the hydrants and everything. I'd like to put this for further discussion of having the city control the pressure. And are we able to do that now with the equipment we've got with certain valves or whatever?
Okay.
To discuss later on, just to take the pressure off the pipes down the hills.
Got it. So discussion on water pressure regulation?
Yes, sir.
Stephen, you good with bringing that up next meeting?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Anything on the left? No? Yes, the subcommittee, keep going there. If you have something, if you have something by next meeting, we can certainly add it on. We just need 1 week prior. Michelle, is that correct when we lock down the agenda? So 1 week prior, if you guys have something, just bring it up and then we'll get it on there. You can send me a note or you can send Michelle a note, either way. All right. Thank you for the future agenda items. That brings us to D2. The next meeting is going to be November 15th at 6 PM right here in City Hall. And that brings us to our second citizen comment period. Are there any citizens wishing to speak? No? Okay. At that, can I get a motion? Let me see here. I'm not missing anything, am I? All right, that concludes everything on the agenda. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
We have a motion, we have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. The meeting is adjourned at 7:16 PM. Thank you.